Okay, so I'm Jess, I'm a housing caseworker at Exeter City Council.
And I'm Harriet, I'm the Rough Sleeping Pathway Coordinator for Exeter City Council. So Jess, please could you tell me a bit about your role?
Okay, so I'm a housing caseworker, so my role is to support people who are at risk of homelessness or who are currently experiencing homelessness in the Exeter area. So that could be single people, families, couples, so all types of different people.
Okay. What kind of clients do you work with?
We've got people who are currently homeless, who are street homeless. It could be people in temporary accommodation or people in their own homes who are at risk of homelessness. They could have received a notice to say that they have to leave their accommodation, and we might be working with them towards preventing that or stopping it going any further, or helping them towards finding new accommodation to prevent further homelessness.
How do families end up homeless?
Oh, there's 100 different reasons why families might be homeless. It could happen to anybody, is the honest answer. So it could be that you've had a change in circumstances, you've lost your job, short notice, and you've ended up building some rent arrears. It could be as simple as the landlord wants their property back because they've become unwell and they need to free up some money, so they need to sell the property. So it could be through no fault of their own that they end up in at risk of homelessness. So our job is to be non-judgmental, look at people's circumstances, be very fair and work with them towards resolving things as quickly as possible.
What kind of accommodation can the council provide families?
So families, initially they could be provided with a hotel or family accommodation. So in Exeter we work really hard to minimise the amount of time that families are in what we would call bed and breakfast accommodation, which would be things like a hotel. As much as possible, we try and move people towards our family accommodation, which would have some shared facilities possibly, but it would be self-contained with a level of shared facilities with other families. It can be really difficult. You could end up with a whole family sharing a bedroom, with bunk beds and things like that. So it's often very pressured, and it's a lot for people to manage, and we try and get people moved on as quickly as possible from those circumstances, but it's really difficult with the housing crisis at the moment.
Where do the families move on to?
So we would try and move people on to either private rented or social rented tenancies. Within the Exeter boundary or outside of the Exeter boundary possibly. So it would be something that is affordable for the families. But we would look at affordability, and we would support them to look at through Devon Home Choice, and a lot of the time we've got a housing access team, so we would within the council, which looks at private rented accommodation and tries to match families with suitable, affordable accommodation, and often our duty is discharged that way. The reality is there's a lack of social housing stock at the moment, so we work as much as possible to try and get families into affordable accommodation as quickly as possible, but often that's private rented.
So what are some of the barriers that families might face in those move-on plans?
Affordability is a big one. So since the interest rates is an example of something recently which has been really difficult. So a lot of the time landlords' mortgages have gone up, and that's passed on to tenants. The amount of benefit that you get towards your rented accommodation has a cap on it. It's called the local housing allowance rate. So that impacts affordability for a lot of families and can make it really, really difficult. So if your tenancy has ended because your landlord's selling and you're looking at a new private rented property, it could be that you're being asked to find £300 or £400 a month more. And how can you reconcile that? So that's probably the most difficult thing, is the affordability for families, and the lack of stock. Exeter's quite a small boundary, so it's quite a small area, and there's a pressure on housing, there's a high demand, which means that landlords can charge more because people pay it. It's a jobs economy. There's a lot of people who want to be in Exeter, and so when the supply is low, the demand is high, then that pushes the prices up, which makes it really difficult for families sometimes.
What are some of the challenges that homeless families face?
So for children, I guess families, adults' experiences is quite difficult. You've got a lot of children that you're trying to manage in a small area often, or even a couple of children. It can be really difficult to have timeouts for the kids in different areas when they're often all sharing the same room. They could have different bedtimes. You've got quite strict rules in temporary accommodation, things like having your friends over. Kids can't do things like that in temporary accommodation. There isn't the space for them. So that can be really difficult. They could have to change schools. It could be, for example, if somebody's had to flee domestic abuse and they've come to the area, they've been placed in temporary accommodation, they could have to start a new school. They've got this accommodation where they might have to share with other families some facilities. That can sometimes be really difficult for kids, having a quiet space to be able to do their homework. And then difficulties for the parents, things like having to pay for school uniforms and or having to get a couple of buses to the school so they don't have to change the schools. So it's really, really difficult, I think, for families. And as much as possible, that's why I really try and push homelessness prevention wherever possible. It's not always possible, but if we can try and keep people in their homes until they find the next accommodation, then that's always the least disruptive thing for the parents and the children. If there's any way to move in a planned way, I would always champion that.
Do you have any success stories that really stand out?
So again, it would be the preventions probably. So any time that we can prevent homelessness successfully and close that case is a really positive thing. So it could be when I've helped families who have not been getting their full benefit entitlements. So having a look through that, get them some advice, maximise their income. And then it could be that they're entitled, I've had it in the past, where people have been entitled to a backdate of housing benefit or universal credit. If somebody's in arrears and they've received a notice because of those arrears and you're able to get that paid, then the landlord can often then not take further action on the tenancy. The people are able to stay in their homes and not have the disruption of having to move between or have this in-between bit as well with temporary accommodations or anything like that. So the biggest success stories for me are always the ones where people are able to stay in their homes.
Perfect. And what is your favourite thing about your role?
I like working with people and I really enjoy getting positive outcomes. So people keeping their homes, people getting new homes and getting the keys for those homes and being able to give you that feedback that they've got somewhere safe and secure for their family. That's always a real positive for me, and it's really nice to see somebody's story of, you know, somebody could be in a crisis, but being at the end of that story where either they've been able to stay in their home and it's a positive success story, or they've been able to find their new home and sort of at the end of that story, then that's a really good thing. And those are the favourite things for me.
Thank you, Jess.
No problem.